All right, we're back on the tractor today, and we got Grandpa again. At this point, we are positioning the jack and the jack stands underneath the tractor, so when we split the case, they will hold the back half of the tractor up. The cherry picker will hold the front half up. We remove the remaining 2 bell housing bolts and then start to split the tractor. We'll just stick a screwdriver in it and pry gently, and it will start sliding apart. We get the tractor split, exposing the clutch disc and pressure plate. Our clutch kit that we have comes with a new clutch disc, pressure plate, and throwout bearing. Here we just unbolt the pressure plate, set it out to the side, and we get our first look at the clutch disc. It's not very pretty.
You see with it.
Well, I've got a new pressure plate.
Well, I know you do, but it's kind of interesting to see what went wrong.
I don't know if you can see the difference there. This one is burnt completely smooth. You can still see the fins on the new one.
We don't have a throwout bearing either, do we?
Yeah, it came with a new one.
All right.
It's a complete kit.
All right. Good deal.
Get some pliers and swap that throwout bearing out. Here I take a pair of needle nose pliers and unhook the 2 springs that retain the throwout bearing in place and pull the throwout bearing out. Once you have it out, you'll have to press the bearing off and then press the new bearing back on. To pull the pilot bearing out of the end of the crankshaft, we'll take our grease gun and inject grease into the cavity behind the pilot bearing. We'll fill it completely full of grease and then take a 3-inch 3/8 drive extension and stick in there and hit it with a hammer. We'll have to repeat this process several times over to create the hydraulic pressure it takes to push the old pilot bearing out. Once you get the old pilot bearing out, you need to clean all the excess grease back out of the flywheel, because once your new clutch gets hot, that grease will run out onto it, causing it to slip and burn your clutch. Here I'm inserting the new pilot bearing back into the flywheel. I know you can't see what I'm doing here, but I have a socket that's the same size as the outside diameter of my bearing race, and I'm driving it in. You always want to make sure your socket's the same size. You don't want to hit the center of the bearing or you'll ruin your new bearing. Normally I'd use brake clean to clean the flywheel up, but I'd forgot to get any, so Dad's just taking a little bit of lacquer thinner. He's going to rub it down good to clean the grease off of it before I come in with a palm sander and sand it. Sanding it will just take the polish marks out of it, the glazing from the clutch slipping on it, and rough the surface up just enough to give the new clutch disc something to bite into. At this point, if your flywheel's showing any checking or anything like that, any cracking in the surface of it, it'd be a good idea to take it in and have it turned. And if they can't turn it out of it, you'll have to replace the flywheel. Fortunately, ours is in pretty good shape. I'll take and clean the flywheel one last time before installing the new clutch disc. To install the disc, you'll just hold it up in place and then take your clutch alignment tool and slide it into the pilot bearing. Make sure it's centered, and then put your pressure plate over top of it and bolt it down. Once you get your clutch disc in and your pressure plate bolted down, torqued to spec, it's time to put the throwout bearing in. It's pretty simple to do. You just slide it in and hook it up onto your clutch fork, and then hook the 2 returning springs up.
Actually pull you around here where you can see what we were doing or not doing or something. Push this thing back together.
Now it's time to start sliding the tractor back together and bolting the bell housing down. This will take a little bit of effort unless you're on a shop floor where everything's nice and level. Unfortunately here we're anything but level, but we get it done. It takes a little bit of jiggling around and prying one side of the engine up and down and jacking the back half of the tractor this way and that way, but we eventually get it there. I had meant to remove the starter earlier and I had just forgot to. It's definitely easier if you do this beforehand, but it's not impossible to do it with the starter in place. Like I said, a little bit of prying and get the dowel pins to line up and get a couple of bolts started, and then it just all comes together. It's a good feeling when it finally does slide together and you can unhook all the straps and take the jacks out and get everything just bolted up solid. In part 3, we'll get the new wiring harness put on it, get everything else buttoned up and get the body put back on it, and take it down and break the garden